Hello there, this is Al24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in our news program. Even though President Biden outlined new plans for battling the highly contagious Omicron, public health experts warned that the measure would not be sufficient to prevent a rise in infections and hospitalization over the next few weeks plus. South Korean President Moon Jae-in has pardoned former President Park Geun-hye, who was serving a 22-year prison term for a vast corruption scandal. Also coming up, at least 38 people have died and 200 others have suffered burn injuries after a packed ferry carrying 500 people caught fire in southern Bangladesh. And the Palestinian Red Crescent announced that the death toll among Palestinians rose to 127 following clashes with the Zionist forces in the occupied West Bank. Even though President Biden outlined new plans for battling the highly contagious Omicron, public health experts warned that the measures would not be sufficient to prevent a rise in infections and hospitalization over the next few weeks. The administration's strategy includes doubling down on vaccination campaigns and propping up hospitals as they confront a large influx of patients. Federal officials will direct resources, including army doctors, to support healthcare systems and distribute rapid tests to Americans. To contain the surge in the coronavirus infections driven by the Omicron variant, Italy has reintroduced the mandatory wearing of face masks in outdoor spaces. The Italian Health Minister Roberto Speranza, who announced that the measure to the cabinet, did not say when the rule would come into effect, but states that higher quality masks would be required in certain venues, including cinemas, theaters, sporting events, and on public transport. Spain has set a new daily coronavirus infection record as citizens seeking to determine whether they are contagious ahead of Christmas gatherings endure long queues amid a shortage of tests. The nearly 7,100 new cases recorded on Thursday were Spain's third consecutive record, high in 3 days. The Spanish government has ordered mandatory mask wearing outdoors, with few exceptions starting from Friday. And Britain and France reported record national high in the numerous of new number COVID-19 infections, while France started vaccinating children as a step to contain the new strain of the coronavirus. Checks tightened arrival conditions for the New Year celebrations.
French Health Minister Olivier Véran said France will report around 88,000 new confirmed COVID-19 cases and that the records would be the worst since the pandemic began in 2020. As governments are fighting to contain a new wave of cases, French health workers began delivering Pfizer jabs to children aged between 5 and 11. And Macron wished happy holidays to everyone on his Facebook page and called people to respect social distancing and to get tested. He also thanked the mobilized medical staff who look after people and protect them. With more than 119,000 new cases, Britain also reported new national record for COVID-19 infections. However, 2 studies in the UK provided some early hints that Omicron may be milder than the Delta strain. And according to the studies, any reductions in severity will need to be balanced against the fact that Omicron spreads much faster than Delta and is more resistant to vaccines. Czech Health Ministry declared that any foreign visitors need a negative PCR coronavirus test to enter the country starting from December the 27th, unless they have already had a booster, in order to limit the spread of the Omicron coronavirus strain during the New Year's celebrations. Prague will allow celebrations, but with restrictions on the number of people gathering in events and in numbers of people seated in one table in restaurants.
Australia narrowed today, Friday, the wait time for people to receive COVID-19 booster shots as another record jump in daily infections resulted in cancelled flights and sent Christmas travel plans into disarray. From January the 4th, the country would offer booster shots to every person aged over 18 who had their second shot 4 months earlier, and the interval would be again reduced to 3 months by the end of the month. South Korean President Moon Jae-in has pardoned former President Park Geun-hye, who was serving a 22-year prison term for a vast corruption scandal. The decision came along with the support of the politicians of the conservative main opposition power and the party to pardon her.
Moon Jae-in, South Korea's president, granted a pardon to former President Park Geun-hye, who is serving a long prison term after being convicted for a series of corruption charges amid the tight presidential race, according to an announcement of Justice Ministry. The Justice Ministry explained that Park was on a list of people receiving special forgiveness and was pardoned from a perspective of national unity in the face of difficulties caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The 69-year-old pardoned president was serving a 20 years prison verdict for bribery and abuse of power, with another 2 years for election law violations. Park is South Korea's first democratically elected leader who has been thrown out of office after being found guilty of scheming in order to receive tens of billions of won from major corporations, mostly to fund her friend's family and non-profit foundations. In 2017, the Constitutional Court supported a parliament vote to accuse her over a scandal that also landed the heads of 2 corporations in jail. The corruption scandal exposed shady links between big businesses and politics in South Korea, and her imprisonment became a political issue that divided the country, with conservatives having weekly rallies in downtown Seoul urging her release and criticizing Moon until the COVID-19 pandemic emerged. Moon had previously pledged not to pardon those who were convicted of corruption. However, the decision came as many supporters and politicians of the conservative main opposition People Power Party have been calling for Park's pardon ahead of the March 2022 presidential election.
An Indian court has urged Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government to suspend political rallies and election campaigns in the voting countries in light of the increasing number of Omicron cases, which could lead to a third wave of coronavirus. A state legislative election is scheduled for early next year, but the final date has not yet been set. Local elections are to be held simultaneously in other 3 states. A fire in the intensive care unit of a COVID-19 hospital killed 2 people in the Russian southern city of Astrakhan, citing a source in the emergency rescue services. In a statement, Russia's emergencies ministry said there were casualties, but no details were given. At least 38 people have died and 200 others have suffered burn injuries after a packed ferry carrying 500 people caught fire in southern Bangladesh. The incident happened early in the morning near the Jakarta, 250 kilometers south of the Bangladesh capital, Dhaka. At least 3 people died in a plane crash in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, South Kivu province, the provincial transport minister said, while another local official said the death toll could be as high as 5. Officials said the plane went down in the village of Kaisha, around 15 kilometers from the territorial headquarters town of Shabanda. And now, Lingnan University dismantled the Tiananmen massacre relief statue, while another peace goddess of democracy was removed from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Let's follow this report.
A liberal arts university in Hong Kong has taken down a relief depicting events during the deadly 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown, a day after a similar artwork was removed from another leading academic institution in the Asian financial hub. Lingnan University officials blocked off early on Friday the area where the Tiananmen Square massacre sculpture was installed before removing it, according to Lingnan University Student Union Press. In a social media post, Hong Kong-based photographer and columnist Galileo Shang also confirmed the removal of Chinese-born New Zealand artist Shen Weiming's 21 feet by 10.5 feet piece, which was installed at the university in 2010. The 2008 statue is made of a copper and is an imitation of original monument erected by Chinese student in 1989 and was paraded in the middle of Tiananmen Square just before the crackdown. It became a symbol of defiance and freedom for the protesters.
The Palestinian Red Crescent announced on Thursday that the death toll among Palestinians rose to 127 following clashes with the Zionist forces in the occupied West Bank. As stated by an association, 42 people were injured by metal bullets, 83 suffered suffocations from tear gas canisters and 2 suffered burns. According to Palestinian officials in several areas of the West Bank, Palestinians have come under repeated attacks by occupiers and the Zionist forces in an attempt to pressure them and drive them from the land. Hundreds of women have marched in the streets of Sudan's capital, Khartoum, to protest sexual abuse and harassment, including the alleged rape of a pro-democracy protester by security personnel. According to the UN, at least 13 women and girls were allegedly raped or gang-raped by security forces during a huge demonstration outside the presidential palace in Khartoum on Sunday. Former U.S. police officer Kim Potter was convicted to manslaughter in the murder of a young African-American man, Don Wright. Potter had tried to justify the murder to court. She mistaken the gun for a taser during regular traffic stop. Islam Sidi reports.
Find the defendant guilty.
A U.S. jury found that former Minnesota police officer Kimberly Potter guilty of manslaughter in a deadly April shooting of black driver Dante Wright while transportation was stopped in northern Minneapolis on May 11th.
Both the left lung and the right lung, the anterior portions or the portions abutting the chest wall in the front were damaged, almost a graze wound, but very superficially injured by the bullet. The majority of the injury was to the heart.
Judge Regina Chu rejected her attorney's plea for her to be allowed to spend Christmas with family. Faces a maximum of 15 years in prison on the most serious charge and 10 years on the second.
We, the jury, on the charge of manslaughter in the first degree while committing a misdemeanor on or about April 11, 2021, in Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, find the defendant guilty. The verdict on count 2 is we, the jury, on the charge of manslaughter in the second degree, culpable negligence on or about April 11, 2021, in Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, find the defendant guilty.
During the trial, the prosecution claimed that veteran police Potter betrayed the badge and accidentally pulled a gun instead of a taser in a fatal case, ignoring years of training. Wright's murder took place a few miles north of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who was being convicted for the murder of George Floyd, a black man who died in 2020 during his arrest for a protest in a U.S. city, caused racism and police violence. The police officer attempted to arrest Wright when she learned that he had a pending arrest warrant. When he tries to escape, body camera footage shows Potter shouting for a taser and saying, "I make fun of you," before firing a single shot from the pistol. The victim's family was full of emotions after the verdict.
Now we've been able to process it. We want to thank the entire prosecution team. We want to thank community support, everybody who's been out there that has supported us in this long fight for accountability.
The basic facts of Wright's assassination was captured by Potter's Warren camera, which led to several nights of anti-racial protests in the Brooklyn Center community and nearby Minneapolis. But mostly controversial, there was no room for it.
Amid worsening relations between Beijing and Washington, President Joe Biden signed a new law on banning products made in China Xinjiang region because of China's oppression of its largely Muslim Uyghur minority population. Pushed by members of the United States Congress, the law passed in both the House of Representatives and the Senate by unanimous votes earlier this month. The U.S. State Department announced that Secretary Anthony Blinken spoke by phone with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg to discuss concerns about the Russian military built-up on Ukraine's border. The Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the call discussed the path of NATO to engage with Russia and emphasized that the alliance remains ready for a meaningful dialogue with Russia while standing united to defend and protect allies. Germany and France valued the announcement of the Ukrainian tripartite contract group on the commitment to strengthening the ceasefire on Ukraine. This came in a statement by the German and French foreign ministries, in which they expressed their firm determination to adhere the measure to strengthening the ceasefire agreement of July the 22nd, 2020. Russian President Vladimir Putin holds an annual press conference during which he talks about the most pressing issues on Russia's domestic and foreign agenda, including coronavirus, Omicron mutant, the country's economy, and about the political and military crisis that is shaking the European security balance stemming from the Cold War. Hussein Barkan reports.
Russia President Vladimir Putin held a major annual press conference, during which he talked about the most pressing issues on the state's internal and external agenda. President Vladimir Putin affirmed that Russia's action will not depend on the course of negotiations, blaming NATO for deceiving Moscow and stressing the need for the alliance to stop its expansion to the east and provide security guarantees to Russia.
Our action will not depend on the course of the negotiations, but on the unconditional compliance with Russia's security today. From a historical perspective, in this context, we've made it clear that NATO's further eastward expansion is unacceptable. I've said this many times, and you probably know this well. Not a single inch to the east. NATO guaranteed us that in the 1990s, and you know what? They cheated us. 5 waves of NATO expansion. And there you go, they're now in Romania and Poland with weapon systems. This is what we're talking about. It's not about us threatening someone.
Vladimir Putin added that Russia did not come to the US or UK borders, but they did.
Have we come to the borders of the US or the UK maybe? No, they came to our borders. You should not demand guarantees from us. You must give us the guarantees. It's up to you, and you must do this immediately right now.
Vladimir Putin shed the light on some historical events, mentioning the USSR, and suggested that the West is seeking to dismantle Russia.
Sometimes it looks to me that we live in 2 different worlds. Back in the 1990s, the USSR did everything it could to build normal relations with the West. With the United States, you could have perhaps treated Russia as potentially and strengthened trust. But no, instead you tried to breaking us up.
Putin noted that the response of the United States to Moscow's initiative regarding mutual security guarantees is generally positive, and 2 negotiating teams have been formed. For its part, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki responded saying that NATO is a defensive alliance and not an aggressive alliance, and that the US is working toward diplomatic talks with Russia.
NATO is a defensive alliance. It's not an aggressive alliance. There is no evidence to the contrary, to suggest anything to the contrary from the United States or NATO members. And of course, our efforts are to work with and defend our NATO partners. We are working towards diplomatic talks. There have been proposals put forward by the Russians. Some we would agree with, some we certainly wouldn't agree with. Obviously, on the NATO example is a good example of that. And we're working to finalize what they'll look like. We also agree diplomatic conversations are the right path forward.
This comes with the 13th anniversary of the dissolution of the Soviet Union approaching, which Putin calls the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century.
Uganda has charged on Thursday 15 people with offences including terrorism and aiding terrorism related to their alleged role in bombings in the country's capital and elsewhere in October and November that left at least 9 people dead. In the early hours of November the 16th, a suicide bomber blew himself up at the entrance of a police station in the center of Kampala. 3 minutes later, 2 other suicide bombers detonated along a road that leads to the parliament. Those bombings killed at least 7 people, including the bombers, and injured dozens. Canada has welcomed more than 400,000 permanent residents in 2021, a record in the Canadians' history. Bringing immigrants into Canada is a major pillar of the government's plan to address the country's labour shortage. More with Nabil Khazini.
Canada has landed over 400,000 new permanent residents in 2021, for just the second time since it was founded as a country in 1867. The previous record was at the beginning of the last century, in 1913, when 250,000 migrants were welcomed to Canada.
This is a historic moment for our country as we have welcomed the largest number of newcomers in a century. Canada is a country built on immigration, and we will continue to safely welcome the immigrant Canada needs to succeed.
Prior to the pandemic, Canada set a goal of welcoming 341,000 new immigrants in 2020, but due to the coronavirus pandemic, it only landed 184,000 last year. Canada doubled down on immigration to support its pandemic economic recovery by announcing it would target the arrival of 400,000 new permanent residents this year. The goal has been achieved.
Last year we set an ambitious goal. Today we achieved it.
Canada needs immigration to drive its economy, enrich the Canadian society, and support its aging population. 1 in 3 Canadian businesses is owned by an immigrant, and 1 in 4 healthcare workers is a newcomer. The Canadian government has said it hopes to add another 400,000 new permanent residents in 2022, and by 2036, immigrants will represent up to 30% of Canada's population.
And we wrap up our news edition with some light news as Disney has a new series making its way to Disney+. Limitless, a 6-part documentary from National Geographic, takes Hemsworth on a journey through science, the field that studies how to slow down the effects of aging and face life healthier. More with Abdurrahim Kashur.
Chris Hemsworth embarks on an epic mission to transform himself by training for 6 extraordinary challenges, showing how to fight aging at every stage of life. And in doing so, let's discover how we can all live healthier, smarter, and longer lives.
They're probably asking yourself why I'm dangling off a rope 1,000 feet off the ground. I'm asking the same question. Well, Disney wanted to make a show about longevity. Turns out this has something to do with it. Here we go.
Each episode will tackle a different way we can live better for longer, regenerating damage, maximizing strength, building resilience, shocking the body, supercharging memory, and confronting mortality. Hemsworth will meet leading longevity scientists who believe that the key to staying young lies in rooting out and reversing the average of time. In Limitless, Hemsworth will come face to face with his own mortality, testing ways to extend his health life in challenges that will stretch his physical and mental abilities.
So strong, so powerful.
If this is going to challenge your body, it'll challenge your brain.
This series will showcase extraordinary examples of endurance science from around the world, from the habits of centenarian martial artists to how Navy SEALs conquer stress. The series will reveal body hacks anyone can practice to keep the effect of aging at bay and keep you fitter, smarter, and stronger regardless of the age. Entertaining, immersive, and life-changing, Limitless will write the rule book on living better for longer. This latter TV show is being produced for Disney Plus by Notopia and Protozoa Pictures, streaming over the National Geographic television. So to answer the question of how can we live longer and stronger, let us push the boundaries of human potential in Limitless with Chris Hemsworth.
Getting older now, I don't feel invincible.
That's all for me and the rest of the team. Please enjoy your evening. Thanks for watching. Bye.